So what is it, Ken, exactly? I mean, so that I can...
The Economist, the political, commercial, agricultural, and free trade journal. Free trade journal. Okay. This is actually the pre-first issue. The very first issue is issue 1. This is issue 0 for weird reasons, which have a prospectus in the issue. In the first issue, we actually had a table on the front page showing our level of data. But keep in mind, at the time, for a newspaper to actually have a table with numbers was pretty radical. But the Economist didn't mean economy at the time. It meant more like the person who was economical, which was sort of prudent in all ways, and with a little bit of a sense of the scientific, rational mindset. It was like saying the rationalist, by calling it the Economist.
Like Adam Smith earlier.
Well, exactly. I mean, Adam Smith, precisely right. Adam Smith considers himself an economist, right? And he wasn't writing the economy. He was writing about the political economy. He was writing about, he was a social scientist or a philosopher, if you will, but writing about how the intercourse of men and money, somewhat a professional license, has become something where you need licensing that's sort of over-regulated. So it turns out that to do, as in an African woman's hair, there's often these sort of cornstalk braids, right? Now that braiding in the United States requires a license that's going to be done as a commercial activity. So a mother can braid her daughter, right? But if a kind old lady from Jamaica grandmother wants to earn some money and wants to do braids for the neighborhood kids, right, and earn 10 quid or 20 quid for doing it, it's illegal, right? It's against the law. The reason why is that ostensibly there's scalp disease that you should be aware of when you're actually doing scalps. And there's also lice you should be aware of. And there's protocols of when you're actually using a comb and brush that it goes into certain alcoholic products to make sure that it goes onto another so that you don't spread it. And so all of this is so important that you need to take a course, you need to take a test, and the course is going to probably cost 800 quid, and to take the test costs $100, and it only happens twice a year and in these certain areas, and you can imagine where this is going. All of the hairdressers who are licensed are white, living in the Midwest, right? or white, right? Because they are of means and they're this sort of people, and it's incredibly discriminatory and racially discriminatory. The people who could use it best don't typically aren't licensed, right? Or they get sanctioned for it. It becomes a barrier that is completely, well, it's not, I want to say completely unnecessary, but largely unnecessary, right? So there would be other ways. You could, for example, imagine that it's not licensed to just be self-certified, right? I'm doing this, and then you have to read a document on what to do, right? You just register yourself on a website. You need a registration. It doesn't have to cost any money. Maybe you don't even need to do that, right? But you could. There's other ways. So that's what we were wary of, which is these regulations that are used as protectionism for certain classes to regulate privacy. It is an incredibly difficult problem that is being poorly handled, and regulation doesn't help. I don't know what the solution is, but I know that the fiction of thinking that the solution is just GDPR and walking away from it is actually the wrong answer. So I think that we need to have probably much more specific regulation around the misuse of data rather than the collection of data. Because right now all we have is just cookie consent forms everywhere, right? And it would be much better that we just regulate certain acts of behavior or misbehavior rather than trying to regulate the collection of the information.
And that's the Digital Services Act, which came out like last week. That's the EU against going after the bad Silicon Valley.
Again, this does feel protectionist. I think Facebook. I think there's a lot of problems with Facebook. I think that there's much fewer problems with Amazon and Google, right? But I don't think that, and Google in particular gets sort of besmirched like Facebook, when in fact I think they largely do things well and the right way. In fact, they bend over backwards to do things in a way that most people would feel very at ease with. Facebook less so, and it's been less transparent. But the idea that we're going to allow Europeans sort of to create these onerous regulations on Google makes no sense. I don't think they understand Google's marketplace. So, for example, it used to be the case that they wanted Google to delete all of their data, right? Well, trust me, someone Googling the word Turkey, right? It really matters where you are based and what time of year it is. right? And what language you're Googling it in, right? Because you might be looking for a recipe, you might be looking for a holiday, right, a vacation. So, and Google is so amazingly effective because you Google a word and you see the information that you really need, and it's your information is different than mine. And all of that costs a lot of money, right? And again, they are investing in it and adding to this great, huge value to society that the European regulators who are trying to regulate this, I don't think fully appreciate enough. So I think we need to rethink it much more responsibly.